You have been praying about the debt. I know you have. You have prayed in the morning before the family woke up. You have prayed at night when the numbers would not stop running through your mind. You have prayed on your knees with your face on the floor, with tears you would not let anyone else see. You have fasted. You have given, even when giving felt irrational. You have confessed every sin you could remember, just in case one of them was the reason the door would not open. And the debt is still there. The bill is still there. The pressure is still there. The fear that wakes you at 3 in the morning is still there. And somewhere inside you, a question has been forming that you are almost ashamed to say aloud, why is God not moving? I want to sit with you in that question today. Not around it, not above it, in it, because I spent decades at a door in Detroit, and the people who came to that door did not come with polished prayers and tidy problems. They came with exactly what you are carrying right now. And what I learned in those years, in those encounters, through watching God move in ways that I could not have predicted or arranged, is something that I believe with everything in me you need to hear today. The debt that is crushing you is not only a financial problem. It is not only a math problem. It is not only a discipline problem. Debt, in its deepest nature, in the dimension where it actually takes root and refuses to leave, is a spiritual condition. And here is what no one has told you, the thing that changes everything once you understand it. Spiritual conditions do not yield to more of what has not been working. They yield to something entirely different. They yield to one specific command. Not more prayer, not more effort, not more begging. One command. And I am going to tell you exactly what that command is before we are done today. But first, I need to show you something. Because if you do not understand what you are actually dealing with, you will take the command I give you and try to use it as a technique. And it will not work as a technique. It only works as a truth that has entered you completely. So stay with me. What I am about to share took me years to see clearly, and I do not want to rush past it. Here is the false belief that most people carry into their financial life, the one that sits underneath every prayer that has not moved the mountain. They believe that debt is a circumstance that more effort and more time will eventually resolve. They believe it the way you believe a traffic jam will eventually clear. Just keep moving, just keep applying, just keep trying, just keep asking. And one day, if you are persistent enough and faithful enough and disciplined enough, the situation will change. I do not say this to be harsh. I say it because I watched this belief operate in hundreds of lives over 50 years, and I watched it fail in every case where it was the only thing operating. Not because persistence is wrong, not because discipline is unimportant, but because the belief is incomplete. It sees only the surface of the problem. And when you treat a surface problem with surface solutions, the root continues to grow undisturbed. Let me tell you what I saw at that door in Detroit during the Great Depression. I want to be specific, because I think the specific is where the truth lives. During those years, the city was in a suffering that is almost impossible to describe to someone who did not live through it. Men who had worked with their hands their entire lives found themselves with nothing. Families who had been comfortable, careful, responsible, everything they had done right, found the floor falling out beneath them through no fault of their own. They came to the monastery door in great numbers, and I sat with them, one after another, for years. What I noticed, and I want you to hear this carefully because it is the center of everything, was that the debt and the financial pressure were not the same thing in every case. The circumstances were sometimes identical, the same loss, the same amount owed, the same closed doors, but something in the people themselves was radically different. Some of them were crushed beneath the weight of it in a way that had no exit. They had tried everything, they had prayed everything, they had worked everything, and still the weight did not lift. Others, in circumstances just as hard or harder, were somehow carrying the burden differently. Not because they were richer, not because their debts were smaller, because something in their interior life had changed its relationship to the debt. I am not talking about optimism. I want to be very clear about that. I am not describing a mental state or a positive outlook. I am describing something deeper, something structural, something that had changed at the level where the spiritual and the material actually meet. And the more I observed it, the more clearly I understood the debt that would not move was not being held in place only by the financial circumstances. It was being held in place by a spirit that fed on something specific, something that was being supplied continuously without the person knowing they were supplying it. That spirit was being fed by fear, by grip, by the white-knuckled, sleepless, anxious refusal to release control of an outcome that the person never had control of in the first place. Debt, in its spiritual dimension, is the spirit of attachment turned against you. It is the grip that was meant to protect you turned into the very thing that holds the provision back. I want to explain this because I know it sounds abstract, and I do not want it to be abstract. I want it to be the most concrete thing you have heard today. When a person is in debt, real debt, the kind that does not just pressure you financially, but gets inside your identity, your sleep, your marriage, your sense of self, something begins to happen that goes far beyond the numbers. The mind fixes itself on the problem with the intensity of a searchlight. Every waking hour is organized around the debt. Every decision is filtered through the debt. Every prayer is shaped by the debt. And what this does, spiritually, is hand the debt an enormous amount of power. Power it does not deserve. Power it cannot use constructively. Power that actually tightens its grip rather than loosening it. The spirit of debt does not primarily operate through the numbers. The numbers are the surface. The spirit of debt operates through fear, through the terror of not having enough, through the paralyzing anxiety that has you calculating at 3 a.m. when God is trying to give you rest, through the shame that makes you feel less than, inadequate, punished, abandoned, through the obsessive grip on an outcome you cannot force. That is where the Spirit lives. And that is exactly where more prayer offered from that same place of fear and grip and desperate begging, does not help. Because you are feeding the Spirit with the very energy you are using to fight it. You are praying from the grip. And the grip is the problem. Now I want to tell you what I saw happen when this changed. When something broke open in a person's interior life and the grip released. Because I saw this too many times, and I want to describe it precisely. There was a man who came to the door. I will not use his name. That is not mine to use, but I remember his face with great clarity because the change in it over 3 visits across several months was one of the most vivid things I witnessed in all my years at that door. He arrived the first time with the face of a man who was drowning. He had debts he could not explain to his wife. He had made decisions that had not worked. He had prayed until he had nothing left to say to God and had arrived at my door because he did not know where else to go. He was gripping his hat in his hands so tightly that his knuckles were white. And I thought, this man is holding that hat the way he is holding his entire life, with everything he has, because he is terrified that if he loosens his grip for one moment, everything will collapse. I prayed with him. We spoke for a long time. And what I told him that day was not a financial plan, was not a strategy. It was one thing. I told him, the grip is not protecting you. The grip is the problem. And I told him what I am about to tell you. I told him the one command that breaks the spirit of debt at its root. When he left that day, nothing had changed in his circumstances. The debt was still the same number. The doors were still the same doors. But something had shifted in him. I could see it in the way he put on his hat when he stood to leave. Less tightly, he came back 2 months later, and the first thing he said when he sat down was, "Father, something opened. I do not know how to explain it. I just started to see things I had not seen before." And in the months that followed, the situation moved. Not all at once, not dramatically, but it moved. The things that had been stuck began to unstick. The provision began to arrive from directions he had not thought to look. And the debt, that enormous, terrifying thing that had been the entire contents of his interior world, began to reduce. What changed? Not the circumstances, not at first. What changed was the command he finally gave. The one command that breaks the spirit of debt where it actually lives. Let me tell you what that command is. But I need you to understand something first, because if you hear the command without understanding the ground it stands on, you will dismiss it as too simple. You will say, Father, I have tried that. And I want to tell you, you have not tried it. You may have performed a version of it, but you have not actually done it. Because if you had actually done it, the grip would already be gone. The command is this: release, not acceptance, not resignation, not giving up, not deciding that God does not care or that the situation is hopeless. Release. A specific, deliberate, spiritually serious act of opening the hands that have been gripping and saying out loud from the interior of your being as a genuine act of, will I give this to God entirely, without condition, without a deadline, without a plan for how He is supposed to handle it. I release the outcome. I release the control I never actually had. I release the fear that has been running my interior life. I release the grip, and I receive right now in this moment what is already here, what God has already given, what is already present and good in this day. And I receive it with open hands and with genuine thanks. That is the command: release and receive, surrender and appreciate, let go and give thanks. I want you to notice something about this command, because I think it is important. It is not passive. It is not the command of a person who has given up. It is the most active, most courageous, most demanding command a human being can give. Because the natural response to debt, the response that every nerve in your body endorses, is grip. Tighten, control, push harder, calculate more. Do not release for 1 second or everything will fall apart. The grip feels like effort. The grip feels like responsibility. The grip feels like the only thing standing between you and total collapse. And that is exactly what the spirit of debt wants you to believe. Because as long as you believe it, you keep supplying the fear that feeds the spirit. You keep praying desperate prayers from a posture of terror that reinforces the terror rather than breaking it. You keep working yourself to exhaustion from a position of lack that generates more of the feeling of lack even when the numbers temporarily improve. The release command does not feel natural. It feels like the most dangerous thing you could do. That is how you know it is the right thing. Because everything that breaks a spiritual stronghold feels exactly like the opposite of what your survival instincts are telling you to do. I want to go deeper into this, because I think there is a layer to it that most people miss. The command of release is not a single event. It is not something you do once on a Tuesday morning and then return to the grip on Wednesday. It is a practice, a daily, repeated, renewed decision to live from openness rather than from grip. And like every real practice, it builds over time. The first time you give the command, you will feel the grip trying to reassert itself almost immediately. That is normal. Give the command again and again and again, not from desperation, from decision, from the settled conviction that the God who made you and who knows your name and who has been working in your life long before you were aware of it is not going to abandon the situation the moment you stop white-knuckling it. I practiced this for 50 years. I want to be honest with you about that. I practiced it because I needed to practice it. I was not born into a state of effortless surrender. I was an Irish farmer's son who understood very well what it felt like to grip, to plan, to calculate, to try to control what could not be controlled. The discipline of release was not natural for me. It was something I came to through prayer and through watching over and over again at that door what happened when people released and what happened when they did not. Here is what I observed consistently, and I want to give you the practical content of this because I know you are a person with real bills and a real life. And I do not want to leave you with a beautiful spiritual principle that you cannot apply tomorrow morning. What I observed is this: the moment of genuine release, the moment when a person stopped praying from the grip and gave the one command from a real place of interior openness, was almost never followed by immediate change in the numbers. Almost never. What it was followed by was a change in perception, a change in what the person could see about their situation, a change in what options became visible, a change in what felt possible, what felt accessible, what felt available to respond to. Anxiety narrows, fear narrows, grip narrows. The person who is white-knuckling their financial life is operating with a drastically reduced field of vision. They can see the debt, they can see the gap, they can see what is missing, and they cannot see much else. The moment the grip releases, the moment genuine surrender enters, the field opens. Not because the circumstances changed, because the person changed. Because the interior space that the grip had been filling, that crowded, airless, anxious interior space, suddenly had room for something else, for a thought that had not arrived yet, for a connection that had not been made yet, for a provision that was already on its way but could not be received by a person whose hands were closed. That is why release precedes provision. Not always by a long time, sometimes very quickly, but always in that order. Because provision is not delivered to the grip. Provision is received by the open hand, and you cannot open your hand and grip at the same time. Let me talk now about prayer, because I want to be careful here, because I believe in prayer with everything I have, and I do not want anything I have said today to suggest that prayer is the problem. Prayer is not the problem. The posture of the prayer is the problem, and the posture and the words of a prayer are almost always the same thing. When you pray from the grip, when you bring God the debt, with all the fear and the desperation and the urgency of a man drowning, what you are actually communicating underneath the words is this: I do not trust you to handle this without my constant pressure. I am not sure you are going to come through. I need to keep pushing, keep asking, keep reminding you, because if I stop, perhaps you will forget. That is a prayer of fear. And God is not moved by the prayer of fear the way he is moved by the prayer of trust. Not because he is indifferent to your suffering. He is not. He sees it more clearly than you do. But because the prayer of fear is asking him to reinforce the very thing that is blocking the provision, the belief that his provision is uncertain, conditional, insufficient, possibly absent. The prayer that moves mountains is not the prayer of desperation. It is the prayer of settled trust. The prayer that says, God, I have released this to you completely. I do not know what you are going to do or how you are going to do it. I know that you know. And I am choosing right now, in this moment, to stand in the peace of that knowledge rather than the panic of my own calculations. I am giving you thanks for what you have already given. I am appreciating genuinely, specifically, what is already present and good in this day. And I am waiting with open hands for what you are already sending. That prayer is different from desperate petition, not because it uses different words. It is different because it comes from a different interior place, a place of release rather than grip, a place of trust rather than terror, a place of gratitude rather than demand. And from that place, the spiritual atmosphere around your financial situation begins to change. The spirit of debt has nothing to feed on when the fear is gone. It thrives in the soil of anxious grip. It cannot survive in the soil of genuine surrender. Now I want to speak about something that I believe is the most practical dimension of everything I have said today, and I want to be as specific as I am able to be. Because the command of release is not only interior, it has exterior expressions. And those exterior expressions are among the most important things you can do to break the spirit of debt in your daily life. The first exterior expression is giving. I want to talk about this carefully because I have seen it misused. Giving is not a spiritual transaction where you deposit something hoping to receive a larger return. That is not giving. That is investing with a religious vocabulary. Giving, in the sense I am describing, is the physical enactment of the release command. It is the body doing what the interior has decided. When you give genuinely, without calculation, from a place of gratitude, rather than strategy you are enacting with your hands, the truth that the grip is not the answer, you are demonstrating in the most concrete way possible that you are not holding on, you are releasing. And the spirit of debt, which feeds on grip, finds nothing to hold on to in a person who gives. I watched this operate so consistently during the Depression years at our soup kitchen that I cannot describe it as anything other than a spiritual law. The families who brought what little they had and shared it freely at the very moment when hoarding would have seemed most rational were consistently the families who found that what they had was somehow enough, not through any mechanism I could audit or explain. Through the logic of providence, which I have come to believe operates by rules that are the precise inversion of the rules of scarcity and grip. Give from what you have, not when you have more. Now, from what is in your hands today. And give in the spirit of the release command, with open hands, with gratitude for the ability to give it all, with no calculation of return. The second exterior expression is gratitude practice, and I have spoken about this in other conversations, but I want to apply it specifically here because I think its relationship to debt is one of its most powerful dimensions. When you are in debt, the mind's natural gravitational pull is entirely toward what is missing, the gap between what is owed and what is available, the distance between where you are and where you need to be. And every moment you spend focused on that gap, you are confirming to your interior world and to the spiritual world around you that lack is the fundamental truth of your situation. Gratitude is the command that contradicts that confirmation. When you stop in the middle of the pressure and name what is actually present and good, not as a denial of the debt, but as a refusal to let the debt be the only truth, you are speaking against the spirit of lack at its root. You are saying, the gap is real, and it is not the whole story. God has been good to me today. This breath is a gift. This person in my life is a gift. This small and ordinary thing in front of me right now is a gift. And a God who has given all of this has not abandoned the larger situation. I am going to appreciate what is here, and I am going to trust Him with what is not yet here. Appreciation is not the reward you give yourself after the debt is paid. Appreciation is the soil in which the payment grows. I have seen this too many times to mistake it for coincidence. The third exterior expression is the discipline of the present moment. Financial anxiety is almost entirely future located. The debt that comes due next month, the income that may or may not arrive, the plan that might or might not work. The mind lives in that future, in the landscape of possible disaster, and it strips the present moment of all the resources and the clarity and the peace that the present moment contains. I have said many times, and I believe it more deeply than almost anything else I know, we must be faithful to the present moment or we will frustrate the plan of God for our lives. This is not a spiritual preference. It is a practical observation. God provides in the present moment. He provides the thought you need, the connection you need, the resource you need, the insight you need in the present moment, for the present moment. The person who is not in the present moment will miss it every time. The practice of returning your attention to this moment, this day, this specific grace that is present right now is one of the most financially significant disciplines available to you, because it is in the present moment that provision arrives, and you must be there to receive it. Now I want to close with something I need you to hear directly. And I want you to hear it not as a teaching, but as something I am saying to you personally, the way I would say it across that little table near the door if you were sitting with me right now. You are not being punished. I need to say that because I know it is one of the thoughts that visits people in financial distress, the thought that the debt is somehow evidence that God is displeased, that the blessing has been withheld because of something you did or did not do, that you are somehow less than the people around you whose finances are in better order. That thought is not from God. I have sat with too many good and faithful people in financial difficulty, and too many careless and unfaithful people in financial comfort, to believe for one moment that the state of your bank account reflects the state of your standing before God. What I want you to understand is this: you have been fighting the wrong battle. You have been fighting the debt, attacking the numbers, praying against the circumstances, and the debt is not where the battle is. The battle is in your interior. The battle is in the posture of your hands, whether they are gripping or open. The battle is in the orientation of your prayer, whether you are begging from terror or trusting from peace. The battle is in what you are feeding with your constant, sleepless, relentless attention, whether you are feeding the spirit of fear or the spirit of gratitude. And here's what I want you to know about that battle. It is not beyond you. I do not say that as a motivational phrase. I say it as a serious observation from a man who watched hundreds of people face it and watched a significant number of them win it. Not always dramatically, not always quickly, but genuinely and permanently. And the ones who won it were not the strongest or the most spiritual or the most theologically equipped. They were the ones who gave the command, the one command, who said, in a genuine and interior act of will, I release this. I open my hands. I give thanks for what is already here. I trust the God who has not abandoned me yet and will not abandon me now. That is the command the spirit of debt cannot survive. Not more desperate prayer aimed at the surface, the release command aimed at the root. Give the command today, not as a technique, as a truth. Let it enter you all the way down. Give thanks specifically for something that is genuinely good in your life right now. Open your hands, and if you can, make the physical gesture. Actually open your hands as you pray and say, God, this is yours. All of it. The debt is yours. The provision is yours. The timing is yours. I am no longer going to carry what was never mine to carry. I receive your peace. I receive your provision. I receive what you are already sending. And then watch. Not with the anxious watching of a person who is checking to see if the technique worked. With the patient, grateful watching of a person who has finally stopped fighting a battle they were never supposed to fight alone, and who has handed it to the one who has never lost one. Thank you for being here with me today. If something in what I have shared has landed in a place that needed it, I would be grateful to hear it. Leave a word below. Tell me where you are in this. And if you know someone who is lying awake tonight under the weight of debt that will not move, please share this with them. They need to hear that there is a command that works, and that it is not more of what has not been working. Subscribe to this channel if you want to continue walking this road together. God bless you, and God keep you in the peace that passes all understanding.